we are live. The members gathering, the second one. Thank you so much, gang, for coming in today. And I just appreciate all of you, and I'm glad you were able to make it. And the first scripture that I want to bring up, as I mentioned prior to hitting the record button, is Revelation chapter 21, verses 4 to 5, because the completed, right, the full preterist completed historical context in Revelation 21:4, some people want an interpretation of, well, in Revelation 21:4, it says he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. And then he said, in verse 5, he says, he who sits on the throne said, behold, I'm making all things new. So some folks that are in, let's say a partial preterist or a futurist view, they're saying, well, what's the interpretation for the full preterist in that case? So I'm going to mute myself. And Lori, I would love for you to take the floor and just offer your thoughts on that.
Okay. So when I came to preterism, I went through historicism and partial preterism. And this was one of the scriptures that always stumped me. I was kind of still trying to put that in the future because, of course, we see mourning, we see crying. Are they talking physical death, spiritual death? But once I became a full preterist, I put all of that in the full preterist package, which is new heavens, new earth is the new covenant. We are out of the Mosaic age, no more Mosaic law. We're complete, well, I say they were completely in the new covenant, or at least heading in that direction. So it's kind of tricky because it sounds like it's just about crying or just about mourning and just about death, but it was all about the Mosaic covenant. When that ended, all of that fear, the spiritual death, all the works, the rituals, all of that, gone. And so to me, that's no more spiritual death, no more mourning and crying over, I can't even imagine what that was. Excuse me. I can't even imagine what that was like back then. Anyway, that's my take on it. So that's how I focus. So when someone asks me that, that's what I tell them. And I try to also just share that we're living 2,000 years later. We have a different idea of what they would have been going through. So what we say is no more crying. It was something different for them than it would be for us today, just in our regular everyday language.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is, if you don't mind me throwing this in there, you're not taking it as an absolutist, like literally no one will ever shed a tear ever, like even like, oh, the sun is kind of hurting my eyes and I'm crying. Oh, see, that means that it's not true. And even the word death, you're applying it more to the new covenant that the kingdom of God has arrived because the new covenant of love, mercy, and grace and truth has come into play. No more will we worship God at a specific location or a specific mountain and need people who tell us what to wear and what to bring and how to speak and how to dress and how long our how bushy our eyebrows have to be today and things of this nature. You're saying that that's more symbolically what it's talking about. It's not being overly literal to say that you're never going to stub your toe and then cry because you got hurt.
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
and I think that started for them here as well. It's not something they were waiting for to die and then go to a heavenly realm. I think it started back then for them.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for offering that, Grady. Because we had to go ladies first, but we got to keep the gents around too. And I always appreciate your voice on things of this nature. Can you add to this, please?
I'm pretty much along the same lines. I don't think we really realized the weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth, and bondage that they were under in the law. They're just not just by requirements of the law, but by the yoke, if you will, that was being put upon Israelites / Jews by the authority that had created that man-made Judaism that they had perverted and turned into a completely oppressive, literally perverted system. And so they were being saved out from under Judaism. They were being saved out of that old covenant that had been initiated, that they had been in because they were Israel and Jews as Israel. And that brought weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. They abused the widow, they abused the orphan. There wasn't any justice. And now the good shepherd, taking them out of that, is bringing them into I don't know. I see the new covenant slightly different. I see we're in a new covenant, but we're in a new covenant through the consummated marriage of the bride. And so I see as children of that union, but that bride was taken. Now that I realize that that's against some, some different opinions. I think there was a rapture. I think the bride was taken, and that basically everyone living is a child of God. But just as if your own child decides they don't want to participate in your household, well, they don't enjoy the benefits of being under my roof and having free food and enjoying that. But that aside, I think that was what it's referring to exactly. They were coming out of a covenant to basically, I would say, into that established, consummated new covenant, which reestablished the spiritual Garden of Eden setting where there was no more separation, there was no more death. There was only life, and as close as you went to Yahweh as you wanted to be. And so that I would agree fundamentally with the idea that it was the coming out of the new covenant aspect. And yeah, that's about where I'd go with it too.
That's great, brother. I mean, I really like how you're bringing in the idea that, because again, full preterism, right? So okay, and we know that there was if we're going to take that position, that there was all those things that was prophesied to occur happen in the first century. So is the bride really us, or, and I think this is a fair question, and I tend to lean towards what you're saying, Grady, that the bride married the groom, right? Who is Jesus, because the father sent his son and called for the wedding, right? Very ancient Israel kind of idiom there. And that marriage has been producing children. Some are children of obedience, and some are children of, what's that word we often hear? Disobedience. And so I think that we oftentimes assume that because we're under the new covenant, that somehow that also means that everybody's going to be perfectly obedient, or because we're under the sovereignty of God, that God is tyrannically going to force everybody to do exactly the same thing at every minute of the day, exactly the way he wants, as opposed to applying some grace and the mercy and love, allowing people to make errors and things of this nature. So I really appreciate you adding that bride and children to the mix. Okay, that's fantastic.
And I would add one quick thing to that, and I would just look at it as you see that whole bride and groom relationship throughout the New Testament being established, and that was the point of his return, was to come for that bride and consummate that relationship. And just as my children, they are under and protected in my family because of the covenant, established, consummated covenant that me and their mother have, to the point they are in the covenant in that they bear my last name. They are our children, and they cannot undo that. But that doesn't mean they don't run away from home, just like in any kingdom. Not every subject of a king is obedient and submissive. So
Love it. I love that. Great. That's excellent. And we're going to hand over the mic to Roxana next. And what are your thoughts, Roxana?
Well, I think they're on the same line as everyone else, but I did want to bring up that in the first, for the context, that the first verse in chapter 21, it mentions what he's talking about and where he's talking about it. And if you notice, there's a 1093 in there. So it says, and I saw a a new heaven and a new earth, and that earth is 1093.
Meaning the word "gi," or right, that
Right. So
which mean
local,
right, it's kind of a local regionalized kind of land as opposed to the entire world.
right. So if we look at it with those eyes, um, then maybe it's not as dramatic as what everybody thinks. They think that we're going to get a whole new earth, that God's going to come down, or Christ is going to come down, rule on a physical earth, and clean everything up. And that's what the Pharisees expected and wanted in the first century. And Christianity today is doing the exact same thing. And they haven't learned, they're not listening to Christ. So when I read this with, especially using Bible Hub, then it's letting those who live in that area know that things are totally going to be different. It's not going to be anything like you expected. It's going to be new. And when you do go to the new heaven or new earth, the earth is a region, it's a land. So maybe that new land is, they're not going to stay in Israel anymore, that people Israel are going to travel around the whole realm instead of in that local area. So new earth might mean they have a new land.
Right. So you're really focusing your attention, like you often do. You bring the context into that first sentence, right? But which is, like you mentioned, you have an earth, and you're also pointing out that that earth word is not cosmos. It's not the entire world that's being pointed there. So it opens the door to understanding it less like God's going to come, smash in, slap around everybody he doesn't like, throw them in the trash, and then just uplift everything and make that utopia, right? You're saying, yeah, they've gotten carried away. And what's interesting is I often try to urge people. I say, much of your questions are coming from what I call the most symbolic book of the New Testament. And I think most people would agree it's the most difficult book to understand in the New Testament. I think a lot of modern day Christianity has evolved a lot of their thinking that is very similar, as Roxana is pointing out, to the first century Pharisees. And I think they're enveloping a lot of that from Revelation, which again is the most difficult book to understand. I'm going to bring the mic over to Jewel. How you doing, Jewel?
I am doing good, thanks. I don't know. It's hard for me to, you know, express my thoughts and put them into words. I am still in the process of breaking all those decades of programming with the Mormon Church. And so, but one thing I can say is since adopting the truth that we just need to keep, we need to keep the two great commandments and not think about all these checklists and everything that we need to do, which was with me for 37 years. That's what I did. They told us what to wear, what to eat, what to watch, and all that stuff. Since I put all that away, and then I just came to understand that I need to love God and I need to love my neighbor and just live as best I can. For me, that actually brought in this newness. You know what I mean? It made things new for me because I'm seeing things completely different now. I'm still not versed in all the other little things, and I'm still learning. And each question I have answered, there's 1,000 new questions to go along with it. But that's the one thing from your teachings I have learned is it's not about being perfect. We're never going to be perfect in this life. And Mormon religion, cult religion, whatever, that's exactly what they teach, that you need to be perfect in all things. If you're lacking in these little things, then you're not going to make it. And so now, since I've just adapted to loving God and loving my neighbor and just doing what I can and not having to worry about checking off all these things. For me, it's brought me so much peace, and it's kind of made, I don't know if I could call it a new heaven or a new earth or whatever, but it's completely different. It is just completely different. And it just brings me a lot more peace. And yeah, I still have stress over things sometimes. And I have my times where I don't feel good. And I have my times of crying over this or that or whatever and feeling bad because I don't have any friends, outside the Mormon corporation or whatever. But I've gained more God, and I've developed a way better relationship with him instead of putting man between us, having a man tell me how to think and tell me how the scriptures are supposed to be, which is why I threw away my Mormon Bible and Book of Mormon and all that, because they have chapter headings, and I don't want anybody to tell me how to think. I want to be able to discover all these new things on my own. And so it probably has nothing to do with exactly what you're talking about. But for me, I feel like, yeah, it's kind of a new world for me because I'm more focused on him.
That's amazing. Go ahead, Grady.
What you're talking about there, Jewel, is exactly, I think, precisely what we're talking about. That existence that you're speaking of now did not exist under the old covenant. And so that is now a way in which that Garden of Eden setting, I refer to it as the regenesis, the resetting of all things back to that spiritual setting. And I think that's exactly what it did. There is no barrier other than what you put in front. Anything, only what you put between you and Yahweh is what is there. So I love that.
Yeah, that was, and actually, it's interesting, Grady, that you're bringing that up because again, what Jewel was referring to was how she felt under bondage, right? And she was set free from that bondage, right? Jesus says, "My burden is light, my burden is easy." And Paul writes, love is the fulfillment of the law, not feasts, not robes, not special haircuts, right? That doesn't mean we can't trim our hair or whatever. It's just the point is that we certainly shouldn't be majoring in minors. And I could only imagine if that's how Jewel felt, that you throw in some "and will kill you," like literally, right? Public massacres. I mean, we know about this. I think we underestimate how violent and how quick these people would put you in the grave. And so that feeling of fear, I think we talked about in the last members meeting. If you go to Luke chapter 1, there's a point where John the Baptist's dad, by the Holy Ghost, says that we may serve him without fear. And we talked about, well, wait a minute, serve God without fear? What does Zacharias mean? What does John the Baptist's dad mean? And we came to the conclusion what he meant was that the people who were leading them at that time had them scared every single day because of their tyrannical approach, if you will. They would kill you, or throw you in a debtor's prison, or just step on your neck for as long as they possibly could. They were essentially very, if I were to quote my Uncle Sam, those guys are mafioso, right? Very mafia-like, except they were the ones who were representing God to boot, right? So I think that's what Grady's kind of hinting towards, that's the idea. And Jewel, that was really amazing, because I think that's exactly what everybody, give or take, is in the zone of saying that's what this means. This is about an inner peace, right? A new heaven and a new earth from the perspective, from the heart, mind, soul, and spirit, as opposed to, I can't believe I have to cut my lawn again. In a perfect world, I wouldn't have to do that again. In fact, I wouldn't have to do it at all. Right? So, and unfortunately, I think that is what people have assessed. To which then I always ask this question: what's wrong with God's heaven? Does he have a problem with the plumbing up there? Does that need to be new? What's the matter? The throne is kind of rusting out. You know, when I kind of move people to think about what that means, like if heaven is beautiful, then why would you need a literal new heaven, right? And so sometimes I use that approach just to say, sometimes I've had people go, oh yeah. And then I go, okay, so maybe new heaven and new earth doesn't mean like literally a new world and he smashes the place and renovates it and, you know, whatever, and gives everybody 16 wings in a Ferrari. Maybe that's not what that means, right? So thank you for that, Jewel. And Jen, did you want to add anything, sister? No? Do you got any questions about that at all?
If I do, I'll let you know.
Okay, no problem. All right, but I want to make this official, Jen. I definitely was not saying that you need to keep silent in the church. Okay, we're going to move on. Yes. It's official. I got it on the recording. Yes. All right.